Imagine being in a packed bar in Ohio when suddenly a country music legend pulls out a gun and fires at point-blank range. Or picture being forced to watch your mother's murder by your own father, a beloved Western swing star. From attempted murders to federal drug busts, the dark side of country music runs deeper than most fans realize. These aren't urban legends or rumors. These are real crimes that shocked the nation. December 19, 1985, started like any other night at the North High Lounge in Hillsboro, Ohio. The jukebox played country hits, regulars nursed their beers, and Johnny Paycheck, the voice behind "Take This Job and Shove It," sat at the bar. Nobody could have predicted that a simple conversation about turtle soup would end in gunfire. Larry Wise, a local patron, approached Paycheck and offered him a taste of turtle soup. What began as casual bar talk quickly spiraled into a heated argument about the Vietnam War and deer hunting. Witnesses later testified that both men had been drinking heavily throughout the evening. The exchange grew increasingly hostile until Paycheck uttered the words that would change both their lives. "Do you want to know what it's like to die?" In a flash, Paycheck pulled out a .22 caliber pistol and fired directly at Wise's head. The bullet grazed Wise's skull and embedded in the wall behind him. The music stopped. The bar fell silent. And Johnny Paycheck's career would never be the same. The aftermath was swift and severe. Police arrested Paycheck at the scene, and prosecutors charged him with felonious assault with a firearm specification. His defense team argued that he acted in self-defense, claiming Wise had threatened him first, but the jury wasn't convinced. During the trial, Paycheck's outlaw image worked against him. His previous run-ins with the law, including a 1956 court-martial from the Navy and allegations of check forgery, painted a picture of a man prone to violence. The prosecution successfully argued that shooting someone over an argument about turtle soup was far from self-defense. The verdict came down hard: 7 to 9 years in prison. Paycheck initially remained free on bond while appealing the conviction, but in 1989 he began serving his sentence at the Chillicothe Correctional Institute. Thanks to a campaign by fellow country music stars and his good behavior behind bars, he received parole after serving 22 months. The shooting derailed Paycheck's career at a crucial moment. The outlaw country movement was fading, and newer artists were taking over the charts. While he continued to perform after his release, he never regained his former status in the industry. The incident became a cautionary reminder of how quickly violence can erupt and its lasting consequences. While Paycheck's bar shooting shocked the country music world, it paled in comparison to what happened when another legendary performer's paranoia drove him to commit one of the most brutal crimes in entertainment history. In 1961, Spade Cooley was living in a sprawling ranch house in Willow Springs, California. The man once crowned the king of Western swing had it all: hit records, a popular TV show, and millions in real estate investments. But behind the rhinestone-studded suits and charming smile lurked a man consumed by jealousy and violent delusions. For months, Cooley had become increasingly paranoid, convinced his wife Ella Mae was part of a secret sex cult. He hired private investigators to follow her, installed recording devices in their home, and subjected her to lengthy interrogations. Despite never finding evidence of infidelity, his obsession only grew stronger. Friends later testified that Cooley's behavior had become erratic, fueled by a combination of alcohol and mounting financial pressures from his failing television career. On April 3rd, what began as another one of Cooley's accusatory rants turned into a nightmare that would haunt the country music industry for decades. In their ranch home, with their 14-year-old daughter Melody watching, Cooley unleashed unprecedented brutality on Ella Mae. For hours, he tortured his wife. Witnesses later testified that he stomped on her head with his cowboy boots, dragged her by her hair, and crushed cigarettes against her skin. When Melody tried to intervene, Cooley forced her to watch, saying, "This is what happens to people who live in sin." The violence escalated as he slammed her head against the floor repeatedly, stopping only to accuse her of imagined affairs with multiple men. By the time he finished, Ella Mae was unrecognizable. The official cause of death: massive internal bleeding from repeated trauma. The trial captivated California for weeks. The prosecution's star witness was Melody, whose gut-wrenching testimony left hardened courtroom veterans in tears. She described how her father had forced her to watch the entire ordeal, threatening her with similar treatment if she tried to leave. The prosecution painted a picture of a controlling, violent man whose success had fueled dangerous delusions. Cooley's defense team attempted to argue temporary insanity, but their case crumbled when details of his methodical abuse emerged, including previous incidents of violence and a long history of controlling behavior. The jury took just 3 hours to find him guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced Cooley to life in prison, where he served 8 years before becoming eligible for parole. In an ironic twist of fate, on November 23, 1969, Cooley received permission to perform at a benefit concert for the Deputy Sheriff's Association of Alameda County. After playing 3 songs, including a rendition of his hit "Shame on You" that brought the audience to their feet, he walked off stage, looked at his deputy friend and said, "I've always wanted to perform for my law enforcement friends." Minutes later, he collapsed from a massive heart attack. The king of Western swing died before returning to his cell. The case transformed Cooley from a celebrated pioneer of country music into a symbol of its darkest possibilities. Radio stations pulled his records, television stations canceled reruns of his show, and his name became synonymous with the violent underbelly of fame. The murder effectively erased his musical legacy. Many music historians now footnote his contributions to Western swing with references to his horrific crime. Decades later, his recordings remain largely uncirculated, his innovations overlooked, all overshadowed by one night of unthinkable violence. While Cooley's descent into murderous madness marked country music's darkest hour, another legend was building his career on a foundation of armed robberies, prison time, and a criminal past that would make even hardened outlaws pause. Long before David Allen Coe penned hits like "Take This Job and Shove It" or "You Never Even Called Me by My Name," he was known by a different number, Prisoner 136-453. His criminal career began at age 9, and by his early 20s, he had already become intimately familiar with the inside of America's prison system. Coe's path to crime started in reform schools across Ohio, where he learned more about breaking the law than following it. He graduated from juvenile detention to state prison, racking up convictions for auto theft, possession of burglary tools, and armed robbery. Death row at the Ohio State Penitentiary became his temporary home, though he later admitted his claims about being there for killing a fellow inmate who demanded sexual favors were fabricated, a detail that would later cast doubt on many of his wild prison stories. During his stint at the Marion Correctional Institution, Coe's musical aspirations took root in an unlikely place, the prison band. Between serving time and dodging violence, he wrote songs that would later become country music classics. The raw energy of prison life seeped into his lyrics, creating an authenticity that Nashville couldn't manufacture. In his controversial Prison Letters, published during his time behind bars, Coe detailed the brutal reality of life inside. He wrote about knife fights, sexual assault, and the constant threat of violence that shaped his worldview. These experiences would later fuel songs like "Death Row" and "Would You Lay With Me" in a Field of Stone, giving his music a dark edge that set him apart from his contemporaries. After his release in 1967, Coe took his prison experiences straight to Music Row. He would park his Harley Davidson, decorated with horseshoes and longhorns, outside the Grand Ole Opry, performing for anyone who would listen. His outlaw image wasn't a marketing gimmick, it was earned through years behind bars. Record executives soon realized that Coe's criminal background added an element of danger and authenticity that audiences craved. Even after achieving success, Coe's troubles with the law continued. Tax evasion charges plagued him in the 1980s, leading to IRS raids and more legal battles. The government claimed he owed hundreds of thousands in back taxes, forcing him to tour relentlessly to pay his debts. His response? Writing more songs about his struggles with authority. Through it all, Coe transformed his criminal past into country music gold. Each arrest, every prison sentence, and all the legal troubles became material for songs that resonated with audiences who had never seen the inside of a jail cell. His experiences gave birth to a new kind of country music, one that didn't shy away from the darker side of life. While Coe's criminal past helped launch his career, another country legend's brush with the law nearly destroyed his legacy when a routine traffic stop turned into a violent confrontation with law enforcement. 2003 marked a dark turn for Campbell, the clean-cut star known for hits like "Rhinestone Cowboy" and "Wichita Lineman." On November 24th at around 2:50 p.m., Campbell's Mercedes-Benz collided with another vehicle at the intersection of Shea Boulevard and 68th Street in Phoenix, Arizona. Instead of stopping, the country music icon fled the scene, setting off a chain of events that would expose his decades-long battle with alcohol. A witness followed Campbell's car to his home in the exclusive Biltmore Estates, where police soon arrived. What they found was far from the polished performer audiences knew from television. Campbell, clearly intoxicated, became combative when officers attempted to question him about the hit and run. The situation escalated rapidly when they tried to arrest him. In a moment of alcohol-fueled rage, Campbell drove his knee into an officer's thigh. As more officers arrived to assist, he began singing his hit songs between profanity-laced tirades. The police report detailed how the Grammy-winning artist threatened to have the officers fired and repeatedly reminded them of his celebrity status. At the police station, Campbell's behavior grew even more erratic. He kneed another officer in the leg while being photographed for booking. When asked to perform a field sobriety test, he refused, telling officers they should be ashamed of themselves for arresting a legend. The breathalyzer test he eventually took showed his blood alcohol level was nearly twice the legal limit. The charges mounted extreme DUI, hit and run, and aggravated assault on a police officer. The incident made headlines across the country, forcing Campbell to publicly confront his alcoholism. In court, his attorney argued that the mixture of alcohol with prescription medications for anxiety had triggered his uncharacteristic violent outburst. Campbell pleaded guilty to extreme DUI and leaving the scene of an accident. The judge sentenced him to 10 days in jail, but allowed him to serve his time in a lockdown treatment facility. He also received 2 years of probation and 75 hours of community service. The assault charges were dropped as part of his plea agreement. Inside the treatment facility, Campbell faced his demons head-on. He later credited the arrest with forcing him to get sober, though his battle with alcohol would continue for years. The incident marked a turning point in his public image, transforming him from a wholesome entertainer into someone struggling with very human problems. While Campbell's drunk driving arrest made headlines, another country star's creative solution to losing his car keys led to one of the most bizarre incidents in country music history, involving a riding lawnmower, 8 miles of highway, and a desperate quest for alcohol. George Jones's battle with alcohol spawned countless stories, but none more legendary than the tale of his 8-mile journey to the liquor store on a riding lawnmower. This wasn't just any drunk driving incident. It was a testament to the lengths addiction would drive one of country music's greatest voices. In the early 1970s, Jones was living outside Beaumont, Texas, with his then-wife Shirley Corley. His drinking had spiraled so out of control that Shirley employed increasingly desperate measures to keep him sober. After hiding every set of car keys they owned, she thought she'd finally outsmarted the possum. She was wrong. Around 3 a.m. on a cool Texas night, Jones awoke with an overwhelming craving for alcohol. Finding his keys gone, he stared out the window at his yard, where his riding lawnmower sat in the moonlight. In that moment of alcohol-fueled inspiration, he fired up the Toro and began his slow journey to the nearest liquor store, 8 miles away. Witnesses reported seeing the country music superstar putting along the shoulder of the highway at 5 miles per hour, still wearing his pajamas. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on passing motorists, who could hardly believe their eyes as one of the most famous voices in country music crawled past them on a lawnmower in the dead of night. The incident became notorious in country music circles, but it was far from Jones' only brush with alcohol-fueled chaos. His drinking habits had already earned him the nickname No-Show Jones for frequently missing concerts. Concert promoters estimated he missed more than 500 shows during his peak years, costing millions in refunds and lost revenue. Jones made it to the liquor store, bought his bourbon, and successfully navigated the lawnmower back home. The incident could have ended in tragedy, either from drunk driving or exposure to the elements. Instead, it became a defining story of Jones's struggles with addiction, one he would later reference in music videos and interviews. This wasn't an isolated incident. When Tammy Wynette became his third wife, she took similar precautions to keep him away from alcohol. Jones reportedly repeated his lawnmower trick multiple times, proving that addiction could transform even the most ridiculous obstacles into opportunities. Friends and fellow musicians tried to intervene, but Jones continued his destructive pattern for years. The story grew larger than life, inspiring songs, merchandise, and even a character in his music video for Honky Tonk Song, where he could be seen riding a lawnmower to the bar. While fans laughed at these references, they masked a darker reality. One of the genre's most gifted singers was so in the grip of alcoholism that he would risk his life on a riding lawnmower for a bottle of liquor. Years later, when asked about the incident, Jones simply smiled and said, "When you need a drink, you need a drink." While Jones's lawnmower escapade became country music folklore, another outlaw legend faced a far more serious threat to his freedom when federal agents surrounded his recording studio leading to one of the largest drug busts in country music history. August 23, 1970-some, Waylon Jennings sat in Nashville's Hillbilly Central studio, working on tracks for his next album. Outside, federal agents from the Drug Enforcement Administration took up positions around the building. The culmination of a 6-month investigation was about to explode into one of country music's most notorious drug busts. The DEA had intercepted a package containing cocaine bound for Jennings' studio. Rather than immediately arresting him, they monitored his activities, building a case that suggested the outlaw country star was involved in a larger trafficking operation. The investigation revealed a network of cocaine distribution that allegedly stretched from New York to Nashville, with Jennings' studio serving as a key delivery point. When agents finally stormed the building, they found Jennings remarkably calm. As they searched the premises, he casually strummed his guitar, even offering to play a few songs for the officers. The search yielded 27 grams of cocaine, drug paraphernalia, and what agents described as evidence of a larger distribution network. The arrest sparked immediate controversy in Nashville. Fellow artists rallied to Jennings' defense, with Willie Nelson publicly declaring the charges ridiculous. But the DEA wasn't backing down. They charged Jennings with conspiracy and possession with intent to distribute cocaine, charges that carried a potential 15-year prison sentence. The case against Jennings began to unravel almost immediately. His lawyers challenged the legality of the search warrant, arguing that federal agents had relied on questionable informants and circumstantial evidence. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that while Jennings certainly used cocaine, proving he was a major distributor would be nearly impossible. In a stroke of legal maneuvering, Jennings' attorneys negotiated a deal. The federal charges would be dropped in exchange for a guilty plea to a misdemeanor charge of cocaine possession. The punishment? A $5,000 fine and no jail time. But the real victory came in the fine print. All records of the arrest would be expunged 2 years later if Jennings stayed clean. Rather than hiding from the incident, Jennings incorporated it into his outlaw image. He recorded "Don't You Think This Outlaw Bit's Done Got Out of Hand?" a direct response to the arrest. The song hit number 5 on the country charts, turning a potential career-ending scandal into another hit. Years later, Jennings revealed the full story in his autobiography. The cocaine wasn't just for personal use. He was spending $1,500 a day on his habit. The arrest served as a wake-up call, leading him to eventually get clean in 1984. Looking back, he credited the DEA raid with possibly saving his life by forcing him to confront his addiction. While Jennings managed to dodge prison time for his drug charges, another country star's violent outburst would lead to multiple arrests and a string of assault charges that threatened to derail his legendary career. Living up to the legacy of Hank Williams was never going to be easy, but Hank Jr. carved out his own path, one frequently marked by violent confrontations and assault charges. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, his reputation for brawling rivaled his musical achievements. The Memphis Marriott incident of 1985 stands out as a stark example of his volatile nature. What began as a simple elevator ride turned violent when 19-year-old Pamela Shields asked Williams for an autograph. According to court documents, Williams responded by grabbing her throat, calling her obscene names, and threatening to kill her. The attack only ended when Shields' mother intervened. The resulting lawsuit painted a disturbing picture of an artist who believed his fame placed him above the law. Shields' attorneys presented evidence of similar incidents, establishing a pattern of aggressive behavior. Williams eventually settled the case out of court, but the damage to his reputation was done. Just months later, another violent incident erupted at a concert in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. A security guard claimed Williams punched him in the face when asked to show his backstage pass. The guard, Benjamin Hurley, suffered a broken nose and facial lacerations. Once again, Williams found himself facing assault charges and another costly settlement. In 1993, things escalated further during what became known as the Montana incident. After a dispute with a waitress at a restaurant in Bozeman, Williams allegedly threatened her with a knife, leading to his arrest on assault charges. The case garnered national attention, with witnesses describing how the country star had become enraged over what he perceived as poor service. These weren't isolated incidents. Police reports from various cities told a similar story. Arguments that turned physical, threats of violence, and a celebrity who seemed to believe consequences didn't apply to him. Hotel staff, fans, and service workers all found themselves on the receiving end of Williams' temper. The violence took its toll on his career. Concert promoters became wary of booking him, insurance costs skyrocketed, and his public image shifted from rowdy friend to liability. Even devoted fans began to distance themselves as stories of his behavior spread through the country music community. Yet somehow, Williams managed to avoid serious legal consequences. A combination of expensive lawyers, private settlements, and his family name helped keep him out of jail. Each incident followed a familiar pattern. Charges filed, quiet settlements reached, and Williams moving on to the next city, leaving a wake of traumatized victims behind. While Hank Jr.'s violent outbursts came after he was already famous, another country legend's criminal career started long before his first hit, leading him down a path that would take him from attempted robbery to San Quentin prison, where he found an unlikely path to redemption. Before he became known as the Hag, before he recorded classics like Mama Tried and Okie from Muskogee, Merle Haggard was inmate A45200 at San Quentin State Prison. His journey from armed robber to country music legend began with a string of poor choices and petty crimes. By age 20, Haggard had already escaped from 17 juvenile detention facilities. Small-time robbery and hot-wired cars led to increasingly bold crimes. His criminal career reached its peak in 1957 when he attempted to rob a roadhouse in Bakersfield, California. The only problem? The establishment was closed, and Haggard was drunk. He broke in anyway, only to be arrested when the owner caught him rifling through the register. The failed robbery led to a sentence in San Quentin, where Haggard's life would change forever. On New Year's Day, 1959, he sat in the prison audience watching Johnny Cash perform for the inmates. The experience ignited something in him. But it wasn't just Cash's performance that sparked his transformation. From his prison cell, Haggard could see the execution chamber. One night, he witnessed the lights dim across the prison, a signal that an execution was taking place. The man being put to death was Carol Chessman, known as the Red Light Bandit. The experience shook Haggard to his core, forcing him to confront the potential consequences of his criminal path. Inside San Quentin, Haggard joined the prison's country music band, honing his skills and writing songs about life behind bars. His fellow inmates nicknamed him the Hag, a moniker that would stick with him throughout his career. He also worked in the prison's textile mill, earned his high school equivalency, and began to turn his life around. After serving 2 years and 9 months, Haggard received parole in 1960. Unlike many ex-cons, he found success almost immediately in Bakersfield's thriving country music scene. His prison experiences became the foundation for songs like Mama Tried and Sing Me Back Home, giving his music an authenticity that resonated with audiences. The final chapter of Haggard's redemption came in 1972, when then California Governor Ronald Reagan granted him a full pardon. Reagan cited Haggard's complete rehabilitation and contributions to society through his music. The former inmate had not only gone straight, he'd become one of country music's most influential artists. Decades later, Haggard would often reflect on his time in prison, crediting it with saving his life. He never glamorized his criminal past, instead using it as a cautionary tale in his music. His songs about prison life, written from firsthand experience, became anthems for generations of country music fans.